Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey watching Married at First Sight. Let's get to the show.
Not too bad.
Yeah. So I feel like we should talk about finances.
Okay.
So I definitely think that it's important for us to, like, if we're looking beyond the 8 weeks and if we really want to start to, like, a life together, like, all married couples have these conversations. They all talk about finances, and they're both very clear on, like, where their partner is financially and, like, where they are together. So I definitely want to show you my pay stubs.
Okay, this is great. Yeah, it's customary for a lot of couples to start talking about finances. Let's look at pay stubs. Let's look at reality here. It's interesting, though, they're talking about pay stubs because I'm guessing for Meka, she doesn't want to just ask him how much he makes because I think she worries he's going to deceive her or inflate his income. And so to talk about pay stubs, that's interesting. I mean, I just have to think about my own wife. I've never asked for pay stubs, and she's never asked for mine. We just tell each other what's happening because we have a track record of telling each other the truth, so we believe each other. But Meka's like, okay, let's look at our pay stubs. Having said that, it seems as though Meka and Michael are bonding, and maybe they can move into this conversation really well. Seems like there's a lot of potential there for maybe some building of trust for Meka. If Michael, here's my pay stub, and then they can talk about it and they can feel more secure, maybe this will be a step in the right direction for the two of them.
What our issues were with each other and, like, how to move forward. And we actually discussed showing each other our pay stubs and going over our finances in more detail. So this is what I make weekly. And there's 52 weeks in a year, so. If we're gonna share a life together, we need to know these things as a couple.
With me just starting the job, I don't have a pay stub, but I do have, like, an offer letter that kind of goes into all of that stuff.
Okay, so he doesn't have a pay stub, but he has an offer letter. Well, maybe that'll pass for Meka. She'll be like, oh, okay, it's an official offer letter. But that's a little shady, I have to say, because, well, maybe he hasn't started the job yet, and so he doesn't have a track record of this salary. I don't know. Let's continue watching.
So, here you go. It talks about the salary right here. And then, I guess, when you kind of go into more detail. So, the actual salary is this, and then you start breaking it down as far as, like, taxes and everything. So, total number of taxes and the actual take-home salary is this. But it's based off of everything that breaks down.
Yikes. So maybe this is going to go better than it looks like it might be going, but the way he talks is, for lack of a better term, shady. Who knows? But we've seen this mode from him before where he goes into this very timid and tripping over his own words in the way that I often do, indicating that I think he's scared and he's on his heels as he's like, I hope this passes. Is this okay? Kind of a vibe. And that sometimes indicates that what he is revealing is something that he knows is going to produce some anger in Meka. So I'm a little confused. So he says he has an offer letter, but then he's showing her his phone. Is that a pay stub or is that just an Excel spreadsheet or something that he has?
Those numbers don't add up. Those are two different numbers.
Yeah, but that's also based because that's how much they take out on taxes. The base number is from that, and then that's how you get to that when you do the multiplication. I mean, that's literally, salary is this, you take out all my taxes.
But how they know what your tax is going to be?
I mean, it was all kind of like preliminary discussed when I had a discussion as far as like what my options was for enrollment plans for health insurance and dental, flex plan, 401k.
But this is like a double-digit difference.
Okay, if I'm going to take a guess as to what numbers they're looking at, the offer letter it says, $80,000 or something. And then on his phone, he is saying, well, my real salary is $100,000. And after taxes and everything, it gets brought down to $80,000. And so in the offer letter, it says $80,000. But my real salary is $100,000 because that's what I've been telling you in the past. And the offer letter is, it exhibits my pay after 401k and insurance and taxes and all that kind of stuff. And Meka is thinking, that doesn't make a lot of sense. An offer letter wouldn't, when you get an offer letter, they just tell you your salary. They don't say, here's our offer. And by the way, that number there, even though we haven't said that in the offer letter, this is what you're getting paid after everything is taken out. That's not usual, right? It's not rational. I can't imagine a situation where they would do that. They might say, here's your gross amount, and here's about what you're going to make after taxes. They might do that. But usually it is say, here's your salary. And everyone understands there's taxes that's going to be taken out from that. So I think that's what's happening. That's interesting. So I don't know. Maybe Meka will say, oh, okay, makes sense to me. Let's rewind that and watch that again.
Salary is this. You take out all my taxes.
But how they know what your tax is going to be?
I mean, it was all kind of like preliminary discussed when I had a discussion as far as like what my options was for enrollment plans for health insurance and dental, flex plan, 401k.
But this is like a double-digit difference. This is not like a small difference. And it says gross. And gross means before anything is taken out. Plus, jobs can't predict if you're going to claim 1 versus 5 versus 8.
Right. Okay. So that does appear to be what they're looking at. Is he's claiming that when on the offer letter is essentially take-home pay. And what she's saying is it says gross here, and it's an offer letter, which is going to be the total salary that they're going to offer. And this is so unless somehow Michael is able to pull out of this nosedive, this is looking like another lie that, in the beginning, I guess was giving Michael the benefit of the doubt, but now it's starting to look like over time, and I've been saying this more and more, Meka might have been right from the very beginning of he is a pathological liar. Now, why would someone do that? Well, as I've been saying from the beginning, the typical interpretation of someone who lies often is they're trying to manipulate, they're trying to get you. And certainly that is possible. There are psychopaths in the world. There are people who suffer from antisocial personality disorder. They don't really care about your feelings. They are actually trying to manipulate other people. They're trying to con other people. Listen to the podcast Dirty John, for example. That is that sort of person. And those people exist, but they're extremely rare. In fact, I met a psychopath once along these lines. I mean, of course, I've treated many psychopaths, but I had a psychopath in my personal life. It must have been 25 years ago or something. And he was a con man, and he conned a lot of money and things out of my friend. He even faked that he had cancer by shaving his head. And I remember seeing stubble on his head, and I remember thinking, well, I thought you just lost your hair. I didn't think when you got cancer you just shaved your hair. Come to learn later, sometimes people just shave their hair because they know they're going to lose it. But anyway, he ended up not having cancer, and he was just, conning people. So those people exist. Michael doesn't really come across like that. Who knows? Of course, I'm only basing it on very little information that's presented in this TV show to me. But there are much more common conceptualizations that I will find to be valid to me, which usually has to do with abuse growing up, or abandonment growing up, or some kind of mistreatment growing up. And there's a number of options, but the main ones are, 1, you learned that in order to survive, you had to lie. Because if you didn't lie, you were going to get abused. And so that creates this knee-jerk reaction, especially around people that are close to you, because if you're being abused by someone close to you, you kind of equate love with danger. And you also equate safety with lying to get out of the danger. So that might be a habit that he gets into. He just automatically assumes that she is going to hurt him, even though he doesn't know how to articulate that because he hasn't been to enough therapy or something. And so he is constantly dodging and weaving and lying out of a habit to try to avoid conflict and abuse. Another possibility is that when you're abused, you end up having sometimes to suppress your anger. And because when you're young and you get angry at things, and then you get abused really badly, you learn, oh, I better not get angry. I can't get angry. I at least can't express my anger. But so what happens is all this anger builds up inside of the person, and they can't express it from age 2 until age 32. And all that anger builds and builds and builds. Well, it has to come out some way. And this is what we call passive aggression. So the anger will come out in a hidden way. Passive aggression, a synonym for this is hidden anger. When you think of passive aggression, think hidden anger or veiled anger. And lying is one of the ways that you can get back at someone. By lying to someone, especially when they find out that you're lying, it hurts their feelings. And so it's an aggressive act to lie to someone. But it's hidden because you're not being forward, you're not being upfront about your anger, you're doing it in a hidden way. The other possibility that I think I would pursue with Michael if I were to talk with him, which of course I never will, in all likelihood, who knows, but I would explore that because I think he's adopted. And when you're adopted post, 6 months, you usually have pretty severe attachment injuries from that neurologically. In that when you're a year old and say you're in one home and then you get moved to another home with a whole other family, the child has already attached to the previous people. Or in some adoptions, they haven't attached to anyone. Either way, there's a massive attachment disruption. And, when we're 10 years old and there's an attachment disruption, it's sad and it hurts and you can have long-lasting damage. But when you have an attachment disruption at the age of 1 or the age of 2, this neurologically changes you because you learn in a very real way that people cannot be depended on. And no matter how much you try to convince yourself that people can be dependent on, your body does not believe it to be true. You believe deep down in the depths of your personality, you cannot trust other people, 1. 2, they will leave you or they will hurt you or you're worthless, because that's another thing that little kids tragically will conclude if they're being carted around like that is, I'm not lovable, I'm worthless. Another thing that happens is because they learn that they can't really depend on other people, they kind of really pull away from other human beings, even though behind that defense is a great need to connect. But they will really recede. They'll just really kind of pull back from other people. Well, when you pull back from other people chronically from age 1 to 18, you don't really develop a sense of other people in your heart. You have a hard time understanding other people, and you have a hard time feeling for other people. Well, when you're developing, one of the main counteractions to lying is you don't want to hurt other people's feelings. The reason why most kids learn how to not lie is not because of rules. It's because of disappointment. Kids do not want to disappoint their loved ones desperately. They really want approval from their parents. And when their parents disapprove of them, it's devastating to children. So the reason why kids don't lie, the reason why we all grow up and learn how to not lie, it's not because we were told the rules or punished. That's, maybe a little bit of it. But the main part of it is because as we're about to lie, we think about all the other times we lied when we were younger and how devastating it was to someone else. Or we imagine what it's like because we've been lied to, and we can imagine what it's like in someone else's heart when we are about to lie to them. That's why we don't lie. So if you pull back attachment-wise from other people, and you're very blank with other people, and a lot of kids who have massive attachment disruptions early in life will be that way. They'll just kind of be, they'll be fine kids, but they're just kind of blank. They're not really interactive with other people. Sometimes these people get labeled as being on the autism spectrum, and they might be, but it can very much be an attachment issue. And there's actually nothing in the DSM that describes this. You could say that it's an attachment disorder, reactive attachment, this kind of thing. But it doesn't fully encapsulate what I'm describing right now. So when you learn you got to pull back, and this is neurological, it has nothing to do with your conscious mind, you don't have empathy for other people. Not that you're incapable of empathy, you're capable of empathy, but you learned, I got to pull back because other people can't be depended on at a very young age. And then when you have an impulse to lie, you don't really care about disappointing other people because you've pulled back so hard. So sometimes those people will grow up and be prone throughout their life, really, to lying when they feel like it. You know, every 3-year-old has an impulse to lie. They get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And dad says, hey, your hand was in the cookie jar. No, it wasn't. My hand wasn't in the cookie jar. Kids will do that because that's their age. They're young and they're trying to get away with something, and they're still trying to figure out how the world works. And they're also still trying to learn what lies do to other people and how it will hurt other people and it will disappoint them. And so they'll just impulsively lie. No, it wasn't me. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And if you stay at that stage and you're 32 years old, then you just have this knee-jerk reaction to lie because you never learned how it really affects other people, and it has that effect on other people hasn't really been internalized. The other thing here is that another factor in this for Michael, and again, this is total speculation based on extremely limited information, but Michael kind of comes across this way. He has some signs of this. This would be an hypothesis I would explore with him if I were to talk with him, is that maybe because of his attachment disruptions, that deep down he's extremely afraid that people are going to leave him. And he is extremely anxious in relationships. And he's extremely anxious of disapproval from Meka and worry that she's going to abandon him, that she's going to disapprove of him. And that's very scary for him. But he's not really aware of it, and he can't really sift through those feelings. He just is very anxious. And as he goes into this conversation, because he's frequently seemed a little shady around the information about his job and his income. And it stands to reason that Michael would believe that Meka wants to hear that he has a stable job and that he's earning a lot of money. Culturally, that makes a lot of sense. And up until this point, he has been giving this impression that he's earning tons of money, he is on an upward trajectory, and he's getting, has a wonderful job. He's going to become a principal, he said at one point. And then he had to reveal that wasn't going to happen, and he again came off as being shady. So I wonder if he inflates lies about his career because he wants Meka to approve of him. Now, when we engage in defenses without self-awareness, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. Our effort, out of desperation of worry of losing someone, our efforts to try to attract them to us can actually repel them from us. And I wonder if that's what's happening for him here. He's trying to say, look, this offer letter says $50,000, but, I'm actually earning $80,000. Now, I have worked with people with this attachment disruption frequently. In the beginning of my career, I actually had a small specialty working with adoptees who had been adopted later in life and had this sort of attachment syndrome. And this is where I learned it. It was firsthand. I'd never been taught it. I learned it firsthand. I would be shocked at how cavalier and confident they were in their lies, even though everyone around them knew they were lying. It was bizarre. You would have kids and teenagers and young adults just lying, just bold-faced lying, and even though they had to have known that all of us understood they were lying. It was a very frustrating syndrome to the family and a very interesting behavior for me as a clinician. I would watch it and I would think, why would you do that when everyone knows you're lying? And you're going to be in so much more trouble if you continue this lie, because everyone knows you took your brother's credit card. Everyone knows that it was you. They caught you on camera. But you continue to lie about it and not take responsibility. So now you're going to be double in trouble. Why would you do that to yourself? Well, if you're terrified of rejection and you have good reason to be, then you'll resort to anything to gaslight, the other person to retain them. But of course, that doesn't work because the other person detects the lies and then they reject you, thereby recreating the relationship of the original abandonment when you grow up, which all of us, unless we get awareness or therapy or some sort of corrective experience, we are all doomed to do. We are all doomed to recreate our past traumatic relationships. Those of you watching right now, think about your past relationships. If you've had a string of difficult and painful relationships, think about the themes. Do those themes have roots in your childhood? Now, they might look a little different, but the themes are like abandonment, mistreatment, infidelity, lying, volatility, neediness, martyrdom, these kinds of themes that we experience when we're young, usually with our parents. Unless we get a lot of therapy or we do a lot of healing or we get to do a lot of self-awareness, we will recreate those later in life. There's a lot of reasons for that. In brief, often there are two main reasons. One is that it's familiar to us. It's like I said earlier, when you learn a certain version of love as a child, you just tend to think, well, that's love. When my mother, this isn't my mom, but this is me role-playing someone. If I have a mother who drinks alcohol all the time and passes out, and then occasionally is there for me and loves me, then that's what love is. That's what I've encoded what love is someone who is, sort of ill or distant or, incapacitated somehow, and then occasionally has glimpses of a lot of love to me. And so when I'm 25 years old and I meet someone like that, I will fall in love with them because I'm trying to recreate that past relationship. Now, that partner, when you're 25, might not be drinking, but she might work all the time, or she might get angry all the time, or she might have parents who drag her away from you all the time. But there's some sort of thing, there's some circumstance that keeps her away from you, but then other times she's back with you. So the theme will look the same, but the details will be altered. Now, so we do it for familiarity because it's like, well, that's love. That's what love looks like, and so that's what I'm looking for because you haven't worked through the self-awareness. The other reason why we recreate these relationships is because we're trying to actually have a corrective experience. We're trying to recreate this, hoping subconsciously that it's going to go different this time. So we need the relationship to look very similar to our one from our childhood, and subconsciously we're hoping that it's going to go better for us this time, thereby erasing the difficulty of the past. Now, that actually can work. One, randomly, if you just manage to pick someone who emulates your past, but your relationship is healthy enough that it actually does go in a positive direction. But that doesn't usually happen. Usually what happens is you pick someone so similar in theme to your childhood relational trauma that it is doomed to repeat itself and doomed to re-traumatize you. Now you have, after that relationship ends, you have two relationships in the past that you have to heal from. So I wonder if for Michael, he was abandoned and rejected and, criticized with contempt or something. That's how it felt to him. And so maybe he's recreating that with Meka by making it so hard for Meka to trust him. So there's a lot of different hypotheses. So there's passive aggression, there's recreation of a past relationship, there's terror of abandonment and lying habitually to try to retain people close to you. There's just a lot of possibilities there. All of these I would explore if he were my client. He's not my client, so I'll never know.
Which would all be different deductions. So I guess that's my confusion.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're best off of me just claiming myself. And I think that's what those numbers are, which is why it resembles that. But I'm not 100% sure, to be quite honest with you. So
This guy can't be serious. Like, it's very clear to me he's not being honest about it. I've never really had an offer letter where it's like, they tell you what you're going to make after taxes are taken out.
Yeah, it just seems so troubling. Other lies that Meka has thought she has seen in the past, it was hard for me to know what was happening. This one seems pretty much of a lie. And let's break this down in terms of what we're talking about when we're talking about if Michael is lying. What are we talking about here? Because there's lots of different kinds of lies, right? Like, I never said that. when you thought, well, maybe I did say it, but I don't remember saying it. Okay, so you're kind of lying. Well, that is in sharp contrast to if he is lying, what he's doing right now, where it's premeditated, where, wait, so this offer letter, would he have forged it or something? But let me think about this. So if he's claiming the offer letter is lower, no, he wouldn't have forged the letter. The letter is a lower number than the number he's claiming maybe the letter actually is the real salary. Anyway, the point is that this is a premeditated lie because he came to the bed, the table, if you will, with this mission to try to inflate his salary. Now, I'll tell you that I actually had a trainee of mine who was like this many, many years ago, where it came to be known that she was a chronic liar, if he is lying, similar to Michael. And I actually prevented her from entering the profession. I was training her to become a therapist, and she exhibited this kind of behavior, just chronic lying over and over and over. And I'm not a suspicious person, so the amount of lies she probably did tell me were probably astronomical, because it wasn't until a long time later when I was like, wait a second, these things aren't adding up. And I thought, well, she's not lying to me. There must just be a mistake. And so I gave her a chance to correct for it. They came back and I was like, okay, it's fixed. And I, wanted to believe, because why would someone lie to me in that way? And so I proceeded and I pushed forward and I was like, wait a second, this doesn't add up. And I went back and it was, more lies and more lies and more lies and more lies. And then eventually I actually had to, what we call gatekeep, and I prevented her from becoming a therapist. I made it so that she couldn't enter the field because of that, and also other pretty significant clinical and ethical problems. I mean, it was just across the board. Usually when someone exhibits one of those problems, they have problems across the board. It's usually that way. But anyway, it felt pretty bad from my end, because I was like, why would you lie to me? Why couldn't you just come to me? Like, I'm on your side. I'm trying to help you. Well, there's usually a psychological reason for that. There's usually some kind of traumas in the past. And my perception of her, she wasn't my client, so I don't know. But she came across to me as someone who was just terrified of being disapproved of. And she did a lot of things to try to get my approval, which was interesting because on one end, I'm getting all these messages of essentially like kissing my butt, but then at the same time, just repeatedly lying, when I'm really trying to give her more chances of like, okay, I'm going to give this back to you. I really need you to sit down and make sure that this is accurate, and then you can come back to the table. And it was just repeated. So why would someone do that? Well, because of something in their past. It's not a calculated decision. People often look at people like Michael, and he's gaslighting. Gaslighting implies there's some mission that they're going on of just like, ha, I'm going to trick. If Michael is lying about his salary right here, which it kind of looks like he is, that is the dumbest strategy you could possibly imagine, because eventually Meka is going to find out how much he makes, one way or the other. I mean, tax forms or something is going to come down the line where she is going to see the hard facts of how much he earns. So for him to lie right now doesn't make any sense, right? And that's what I would see in those individuals who had massive attachment disruptions early in life. Their lies would make no sense. They would lie about things when it didn't serve them, it didn't help them, it was obvious they were lying. That was what was so striking about it. Because, as a family therapist, I would treat a lot of kids and a lot of teenagers, and, some kids, some teenagers, they get into lying sometimes. No, Mom, I didn't smoke pot in your bedroom when you were out of town. That never happened. Well, why is there a bong under my bed? That kind of thing. Kids lie. They're trying to get out of things sometimes, and so some of that's normal. But then I would see this whole other category of kid or young adult, where it was just incessant lying that was obvious even in times when it didn't serve them. I would see kids lie. They might lie about something like they had an assembly at school that day, and they were let out early. So the assembly, and then they were let out early from school, and they walked home, and they got home early. And then I would have a session with them, and I'd say, oh, your parents said that you were let out of school early today. And the kid would, no, that didn't happen. I'd be like, oh, well, your parents said that you had an assembly and that they let you out of school like a half hour early. I was just curious as to, how your day was. They didn't let us out early. I don't know what you're talking about. And I would detect that they thought I was yelling at them, or they thought that I was trying to get them in trouble for getting out of school early, even though the school let all the kids out early. There was this reaction, this automatic knee-jerk reaction to lie for no reason. There was no reason for a kid in that situation to lie to me, and yet they would lie. And I'd just be like, what is going on? By the way, I just said knee-jerk reaction. Someone, I don't know if I said this in one of these videos, but one of you viewers emailed me and said, English is not your first language, and you said, you keep seeing this thing like knee-jerk reaction. What is that? Well, if you don't know what it is, it's knee jerk, meaning that your knee jerks. And it's when you do, I think that American or English phrase comes from when you have that reflex and you have that automatic knee jerk, right? When the physician hits your knee with a mallet. I think that's what it means. So it's an automatic, knee-jerk reaction is an automatic reaction. Anyway, let's continue watching.
But the proof is in the face of that I don't have yet. So we can just really just kind of table it until that happens, and I think that's a better starting point. Because clearly this is not...
No, I want you to explain why this number is different.
I think I've explained it to the best of my ability based off what I know.
Well, what do you make, though? Because this is a big difference. So I'm just... trying to understand what you're trying to tell me, because right now it's just not really making sense in my brain. I think that Michael doesn't understand that I don't really miss a beat, and that's how my brain works, because I just don't think he's ever been held accountable in the way that I hold him accountable.
Right. So that's often the perspective. I have no idea. But if Michael has one of those trauma or abandonment or attachment disruption types of habitual lying, the belief for these kids or these adults is they need to be held accountable. They need to be punished for their lies so that they won't lie anymore. In my experience, that never worked because the issue at hand was much deeper than that, as I think I've been explaining. Now, I don't know, maybe he has been spoiled and that's why he lies so often. It doesn't seem that way to me, but anyway, if I was Meka, I'd be livid. I'd just be like, so we've been talking about you lying this whole time, and now you're going to lie right to my face about your salary? It's not about if I would be okay if you just sat down and said, you know what, I've been kind of giving you impression that I've been earning X amount. Actually, it's a lot lower than that. I'm sorry. Here's my salary. Black and white. Here's my salary. That would probably cause a little bit of hurt for Meka of just oh, well, that doesn't feel good. But that amount of hurt would be so much lower than the amount of hurt that she's going through right now, which is he is trying to trick me and repeatedly without any remorse seemingly. Now, again, I don't know if Michael actually is trying to trick her, but she certainly sees it that way. And there seems to be some evidence of that.
So him trying to change the offer letter to be a higher number, honestly, the offer letter was forged. And it's not gonna really slide with me. And we had a conversation about being honest going forward. And I'm giving you the floor to be honest. And you're still not being honest. I have a math degree. Numbers, that's my thing. I remember numbers. If I don't remember nothing else, I remember numbers.
I understand.
So I cannot say yes on decision day if you continue to lie to me. That was a very honest conversation we had off camera. And you said, from now on, I will not lie to you anymore. And I'm asking you to honor that commitment in this moment.
All right. So let's say that Michael is not lying in this moment. Here is what I would be looking for in terms of behavior that would move them in the right direction if Michael is trying to retain the relationship. It would be something like this. It would be something like, so I know that the numbers look really bad, and You're just going to have to trust me. Now, I'll prove it to you with another document. How about we call this person? How about we call HR tomorrow, and they'll tell you exactly how much I'm making. Or let me show you the deposit that I did in my bank account last week. Or, I realize it looks shady, but I'll prove it to you. This stuff right here is, I get it. It looks a little shady, but I'll prove it to you. Maybe that would help Meka to be like, okay, well, I'll give him another day. What I suspect he's going to do, even if he is telling the truth, is to retreat, because he does that. He doesn't have eye contact, and he does a lot of self-soothing like this, and he shuts down, and Meka will probably not appreciate that, because it's more hurtful and more scary to her of like, is this our life now? So let's continue watching.
I feel like the commitment is being honored, and I understand that you feel very strongly about the reality of what our financials look like. And for me, honestly, at this point, because that's not any fleshed out data, it's just an offer letter with language that doesn't make sense for you from the mathematical standpoint.
Can you write down like your salary?
So it's not looking good, because the way he is talking is evasive. It sounds, like I said, if he was coming from a place of truth, he might say something like, well, I'm sorry, we'll definitely call HR tomorrow, or as soon as I get a pay stub, you'll see. You might hear something like that from someone if they were telling the truth. Instead, he's just like, well, I don't know what to say. It doesn't make sense to you. So it's sort of landing itself. If he is telling the truth, he is doing a very bad job of convincing her that he's telling the truth. Let's just put it that way.
Before taxes or before anything, like your actual salary.
There you go.
Montre, I know we said we wouldn't walk away, but honestly, I am at my breaking point right now. I need to step away from this, because I'm not going to sit here and have a conversation with him when all he's doing is lying.
So I wish that we could see these numbers so we could get some idea of what she's reacting to. Because there's a possibility that she's overreacting because of past lies that have happened or something. But I think that Meka is a level-headed person, and if I'm going to go by her reaction, what I'm imagining happening is on the offer letter, it says, let's say, $50,000, and he's saying he's actually earning, the salary is $70,000, and it comes down to $50,000 after taxes. And then she asked him, okay, write down your salary, which is interesting that when he was showing on the phone, he does. So I'm just guessing that it was something along those lines, but she just asked him, write down your salary, your gross salary, because what you're claiming on this letter is that it's after taxes. So why don't you just tell me your gross pay? I'm guessing if the offer letter said 50,000, I'm guessing he said like 90,000, because the way she's reacting indicates that she is positive. There's no way you're going to have a salary of 90,000 and have 40,000, almost half of your paycheck to taxes. It's just not going to happen. Now, sometimes people have 401ks that involve that amount of investment, that amount taken out of your taxes. Who knows? But I'm suspecting that she is seeing a very high number right now that doesn't make any sense in terms of what he is claiming, even if the offer letter was after taxes, because she's pretty upset right now. Who knows, but that's seemingly the indication.
That is not the number. He's going to keep writing down false numbers. He's just going to keep getting lower. Why not just be honest?
Oh, I take back everything I said. So he wrote down a number that was lower than the gross number he had said before. So I'm trying to piece this together because I'm trying to understand, what the lie is. So on the phone, he's saying, let's say he said, I'm earning 90,000, and it comes down to 50,000. And so this offer letter says 50,000. And she's like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus an offer letter would have your real gross. And then she's like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, last chance, Michael. Tell me what your real gross pay is. And remember, he's already said 90,000. But the offer letter says 50,000. This is just me completely just taking stabs in the dark. And then he's like, well, okay, I can't say 90,000 because she's on to me. So I'll say 70,000. So he writes down, okay, fine, 70,000. And now she's like, so you just lied to me. Your pay is coming down as I confront you on the validity of these numbers. This is what I experienced with that trainee. Was at the first offer I got of paperwork, I was like, this doesn't make sense. How about you redo it? And then I would get it back again, and the number was coming down. She was inflating numbers. The number was coming down. And then I'd be like, okay, so maybe you just made a math mistake the first time. It still doesn't look right. How about you redo it again? I get back the paperwork again. It's come down a little bit more. So now what am I supposed to think? Why did you turn in those numbers the first time, knowing that they were off, and then you knew I was paying attention and you brought the numbers down, and now I'm giving it back to you and you're giving back the numbers. We did this 5 or 6 times and the numbers kept coming down. So now you're thinking, when are you ever telling the truth? And I wonder if that's what just happened. I wish we could actually see the numbers, but of course they're not going to show that on the show anyway. So this doesn't look good. I wonder if Meka's at her end. But I've been here before with this couple where I've thought, oh, this must be the end, and then they keep going. So who knows?
That's the number.
Weirdo. I don't know what more I can do to make this marriage work if he's not going to be honest.
So you just heard the producer say, why don't you just write the number? And then he's like, that's the number. And it comes across kind of shady, right? Because if you were telling the truth, you would say, look, I get it, but that's the number. Call HR. They'll confirm it for you. You know, something along those lines, instead of like saying, you're just going to have to believe me. And then Meka says, weirdo. So this is what I would encounter with this kind of attachment disruption, is how strange the lying is, how weird it was that you would lie when it's so easily discovered that you're lying. It was so weird. Again, I don't know. I don't even know if he's lying, but if he is, and it is chronic, and he does have attachment disruption early in life, it would fit that profile. And I would explore that hypothesis if he was a client of mine.
I don't want to be with a liar. I've repeatedly said it and keep lying. I don't want to be with somebody like that.
Don't tell him that.
What's the point? He doesn't know how to stop lying. Where is it going to get me by telling him that?
So you can tell she's really distressed right now. Like you can hear it in her chest and her voice. And this is what it feels like to be chronically lied to. If you've ever been with someone who's a pathological liar, it is extremely dysregulating. I've been around people like that before. It's weirdly scary to be around someone who would lie like that, just right to your face. Because if they're willing to lie so flagrantly to someone that they're supposed to love in a way that is so easily discoverable by me that they're lying, what else is this weirdo capable of? It's very scary. And I think Meka is feeling that, which makes sense.
Nowhere. He knows this. I've told him. That is who Michael is. Like, there's nothing I can say to him to make him stop lying. He has committed to me at least 10 times now to stop lying. And he repeatedly lies every single time. Would y'all want to be with somebody like that? Any of y'all want to be with a liar? That's him. I don't want to be with a liar. I know what I deserve. I don't deserve to be treated that way. And I don't deserve to constantly be lied to and not to know what's true when my husband is telling me something.
Yeah. If he's lying, and if he has lied, which it seems like it's looking like he has, she has every right to be upset. I would feel the exact same way as Meka. It is very upsetting. It's very scary and extremely hurtful and extremely concerning that someone would just lie to your face like that. Like I said, I have a lot of conceptualizations as to why someone would do that don't involve psychopathy, meaning, I'm going to get her. It's usually some shame-based, attachment-based, abandonment, fear, reactivity. But yeah, it's awful.
I don't deserve that. and I won't tolerate it. And I've tolerated it long enough, and I've kept allowing him to make this commitment to me that he'll be truthful. Not once has he honored it. But it's a marriage. I stayed and I allowed him to, kept giving him the benefit of the doubt each and every time. And he continues to lie. He needs help. That's beyond me. He's living his best life, lying to me, telling me wherever the he feel like I want to hear. But I'm the one stressed about the fact that I don't know about my husband. I don't know who this dude is. He needs help.
Yeah, I think that everyone needs therapy, and particularly those people who have massive attachment disruptions and are engaging in pathological lying as a way of trying to manage abandonment. I don't know if that's the case, but everyone deserves therapy, everyone needs therapy, and particularly those people who are shooting themselves in the foot with learned defenses or attachment, arrested development, this sort of thing. So I'll agree that if we are conceptualizing at least close to the ballpark, then therapy would definitely help him. It would be long term though, and it would have to be someone that understood enough to explore these hypotheses with him.
He needs professional help. That's how we get beyond it. And he figures out why the he can't stop lying. When he figures out his issue, then maybe we can talk about working through this. Until then, I'm not going to keep allowing myself to be subjected to a liar.
Now, I will say, like I said, I have no idea who the real Michael or Meka are. This show is just a tiny pinhole through a fence that I'm watching a baseball game through. And also, I have no idea if Michael is lying or Meka is overreacting. So I just want to go on the record and say I really just don't know. I know enough about reality to know that there's a whole other deeper part to this story that is just not shown on the TV. Now, maybe with more data, it would just confirm some of the hypotheses I'm throwing out, but who knows? All right, if you haven't become a patron of the podcast, please do so now. Go to patreon.com, become a patron of our podcast. That really shows us that you like what we're doing. Every time someone becomes a patron, I get an email indicating that you've become a patron, and it warms my heart. It really, really does. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.